leader training so that she can kind of pour into us and really give us some really tangible, concrete things that we can do, because we all know there are times when we have trips that we have goers, we have things, we just feel like, I just don't know how to do this better. And this is hopefully some tools that we can do. But TJ is the founder and executive director of Working Women of Faith. It's a nonprofit organization that exists to equip and encourage women of faith to live out their calling in the workplace to the glory of God. So TJ is also a business leader, an entrepreneur. She's an author, she's a speaker. She has a proven track record as a strategic advisor and a change agent within the small business sector. So we are just thankful that she is here to kind of give us some tools. So with that,
Awesome.
she's going to have it.
Awesome. Thank you. Do you want to pass these out? So I have some handouts only because I want you to have something to take with you when you leave that you can reference and just to kind of chew over it, because we're going to cover a couple different topics. So as we change from, going through the tactical and the changes in the organization and new initiatives, which by the way is like super inspiring to me. I love the whole local sourcing thing, and I don't think it's going to be hard to get our teams on board with that, because local sourcing is all the rage right now. Have you noticed this? Let's source locally. So, but I'm super excited about that as well. So as we switch gears, I just wanted to say that we have a couple goals during this section of the training, and one is to encourage you. So to encourage you where you are leading well, and then the other is to equip you maybe where you're not leading so well. Okay? So we all have room for growth. As leaders, and as leaders, we never stop growing. Once you do, you're no longer a leader. So in my eyes, anyway. So these are 3 topics that the leadership asked me to speak on and teach on this evening to all of the leaders. So can we get one more up here? That'd be awesome. So we're going to be covering 3 different topics. So it's going to be a lot to kind of take in. And that's why I want you to have something that you can take notes. Number 1, to keep you awake, because it's 8 o'clock and it's pretty close to my bedtime. But and number 2, because you've already had a lot of information and this is just going to be a lot more, and I want you to have something to take with you. So we're going to be covering servant leadership, biblical conflict management, which hopefully will be really practical, and then shepherding your team is the other thing. So these topics are just a way for Healing Haiti to just feed into you as a leader, and we know that as the leader goes, so goes the trip, right? Just like as the leader goes, so goes the organization, the country, whatever you want to say. All of those things affect what's going on. And so some of this will be interactive, some of it will be reflective. So you're going to be rating yourself. Oh, fun. Who loves doing that, right? But it's good. We have to do that as leaders. We have to step back and go, how am I doing in this area? And it's very hard to do that when you're in the middle of a trip. So, you can, but good to do it ahead of time and say, okay, this is an area I need to work on, this area I don't, or this one I need a little bit more. And so we're going to go through that a little bit. And I'll ask questions where it's applicable, and then any questions, of course, with Healing Haiti we'll handle afterwards. So let's dive into it a little bit, and I just want to throw out there, I want you guys to tell me what you think leadership is. So just say it out loud, you don't have to raise your hand. What is leadership?
Empowering others.
Empowering others.
Delegation.
Delegation.
Humility.
Humility.
Influencing.
Influencing.
Inspiring.
Inspiring.
Helping others become the best self themselves.
Helping others become the best version of themselves.
Visionaries.
Visionaries. Examples. All of those are really good. But for the purposes of how I look at leadership, it's influence. And that influence can be either good or bad, right? So I'll try and keep the handout with me so I can cue you in. Let me know if I miss one for you of where you're supposed to fill in. But leadership is influence. And that influence can either be good and positive, or it can be bad and negative. So who here has ever worked for or been under a leader that was a poor leader? Like almost all of us can raise your hand, and you know the havoc that it wreaks on all of the team underneath them, right? It affects everybody. They take it home with them. It's just awful. And so we've all been a part of that. So just because you've been given a position of leader in Healing Haiti, leader of groups, as I have, and by the way, who's been on more than one, led more than one trip on their own? Raise your hand. All right, so you're all ahead of me because I lead my first trip in February. So I am in this journey along with you. I've co-led, but most of you are going to be more experienced on the whole trip goer. But I have led lots of teams and organizations, and so that it's people are the same, right? It's just different environments and situations. But just being given a position does not make you a good leader, nor does it give you the right kind of influence. So it actually takes work to be a good leader. Being a bad leader takes doing nothing. Nothing for yourself and nothing for your people, and I think we would all agree with that. So there's a lot of different types of leadership styles, and you'll hear about them. There's autocratic, democratic, laissez-faire. There's books and books written on all different types of leadership styles. But in selecting servant leadership, we're looking at a leadership style that is in alignment with the values, the mission, the vision of Healing Haiti. And you can see where, and you will see where servant leadership is definitely the type of leader that Healing Haiti would like to foster in us, right? To be a servant leader. And so although there's a lot of different ones, let's focus on being a servant leader and how we grow as a servant leader. Because that's ultimately what we're doing when we go to Haiti. We're serving our team, and we're helping them serve in Haiti as well. And so I really just want you to look at how do you grow in that. You can grow as a leader. You might have a natural leadership style that just comes very natural to you, but it doesn't mean that you can't grow in other areas. So if servant leadership, if you're going through this and you're going, man, I'm scoring kind of low on all of these, I guess I shouldn't be doing this, don't worry about it. You can grow as a servant leader. And so there's a quote on there from Leo Tolstoy that says, everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself. And isn't that true? It's hard to take that inward look at ourselves and change ourselves, but part of the reason why you're here is because you like the idea of changing what's going on in Haiti and helping and serving, and you want to be a part of that change. And so that's great. But one of the things that you want to ask yourself is really why you do that. The motivation behind what we do determines the results. And so that's your first fill-in, or your second fill-in there, third fill-in, is to ask yourself, why do I want to be a trip leader in Haiti? Or why am I one, if you've been doing it for some time? I'm not going to ask you to share this out loud, so don't worry, but I want you to just take a minute and think about it, jot down a few words. Want to be a trip leader has anything to do with you, it's the wrong reason, right? If you started out with, I want to do this and this, and it's about you, it's for the wrong reason. And I've had conversations with leaders before that are like, well, I want to do this because in the future, I'm going to be living in Haiti. Well, in my mind, it's the wrong reason to be a leader for Healing Haiti. It's a self-focusing reason, right? And so we want to just check our motivation, because the wrong motivation equals the wrong results, right? So anytime we're serving ourselves, we're going to end up with the wrong results. And so it might sound a bit harsh, but I want us to be real. And one of the things that I do when I'm teaching and I'm speaking and I'm working with teams and that I'm known for is that I tell it like it is. And I just do. So some of the things I'm going to say, you're going to be like, ouch, that bites. But it's for your good. That's what I tell my kids anyway, or used to when they were tiny, and now they're grown. So wrong motivation will always equal in the wrong results. And so what's interesting is servant leadership has Minnesota roots. Robert Greenleaf was the one who developed this whole theory of servant leadership back in the 1970s, but he actually went to Carleton College. So you can say servant leadership was born here. And aren't we just so nice up here in Minnesota that we just want to serve everybody, right? So But that's where it started, really kind of became well known in the 1990s, but it wasn't until 2008 that it had a real big spike in popularity. And who can tell me what happened in 2008, 2009? Yeah, Great Recession, right? Which a lot of people say was a direct result of unethical behavior by management in corporations and lending institutions. So hence it became all of a sudden important to have ethics in leadership. Not that it wasn't before that, but it became that way. So the great thing about serving others is that it causes greatness in the world, I believe. And you can see that example in Jesus. You know, he's the ultimate servant leader, right? And what he said to his disciples as he washed their feet is, what I'm doing for you, do for each other. This is the example that I want you to follow. And so if you're ever wondering, is what I'm doing right now a servant leader kind of move? Compare it to him and say, well, is this something that Jesus would do or say or respond to my team or my spouse or my kids or the people that I work with? Because I think that as we serve as Jesus serves us and still is serving us, we reflect him more and we reflect his glory. So I think servant leadership is an excellent style of leadership to dig into. So we're going to go into the 10 essentials that Greenleaf came up with for this. And you get the fun task of rating yourself on where you think you're at on this as I talk a little bit about it, okay? And this is just for you to be honest. Nobody's looking at your paper. This is all about you growing as a leader, and that means being real with yourself and being honest with yourself. And if you're not sure where you rate on some of these things, go home and ask a friend, ask a significant other, say, hey, be honest with me. Where am I at on this? You know, I think I'm here. Where do you think I am? And then this will also help us guide in future leader training, because the leadership team is really serious about growing us as leaders. And so this identifies some different areas that we can have as topics in the future to continue to grow in. So we're not going to just throw this all out you and then just leave you running for another year. It's going to be kind of a continual process of bringing wisdom and knowledge from other people and teaching tools that you can grow. So the first one is listening. So you're going to rate yourself on this. A servant leader listens first and listens to understand and not respond. And there's a big difference between those. And you've been around people who listen to respond, because you barely finish your sentence and they're starting theirs. And you can see in their eyes that they're thinking of what they're going to say. And I do this sometimes just because of my direct style of communication. I've already thought of what I'm going to say, and then I have to stop myself and go, no, I need to understand what they're saying first. And so I don't know if you guys are familiar with Stephen Covey, but Beyond the 7 Habits, he wrote a book called The 8th Habit. I don't know if you've ever read it, but in there he talks about listening to understand. And he actually used in negotiating meetings between opposing parties, so to speak, this tool of the listening stick. And it's this Native American stick that was actually part of Native American culture, where whoever was speaking got to hold this stick. And I want to try this at home sometime just because I think this would be fun, right? I got the stick. But no, that's not how it works. So whoever was speaking held the stick until they felt that the other person both heard and understood what they said. And then that person got the stick, and then it was their turn to speak. And so just thinking about that, okay, I'm going to give this person, some space. So in your own listening skills, and be honest with yourself, where do you think you're at on that? Go ahead and rate yourself 1 to 5. 1 being the lowest, not number 1, and 5 being the highest. So the next one is that a servant leader is empathetic. And empathy is really not sympathy, right? It's not, I feel sorry for you. It's actually trying to put yourself in that person's shoes, whether it's a place of pain or a place of joy. A lot of times people feel like they're being empathetic when they're playing one-upmanship. Oh, you think that's bad? Do you know, I had a similar experience, only mine was worse, kind of thing. That's not empathy, right? that's one-upmanship. That's who's got it worse. And so empathy is really, it's hard to have empathy if you haven't been through a similar experience. My dad passed away really suddenly last December, totally unexpectedly. And now when I meet people who have lost their father, it hits me. It just hits me like I feel for them, right? I just feel a pain there with them because I've experienced that loss. And so you're not necessarily going to be able to feel everybody's loss or joy, but just to be able to take a breath and say, what would it feel like to have gone through that? That's being empathetic. So where are you on the empathy scale? Is it, we go on these trips and people's junk comes out, right? I mean, my own junk comes out when I go on these trips because we're vulnerable and we're in an unfamiliar territory, and it's making us feel things we haven't felt in a long time or maybe ever felt, and so people's junk comes out. And so how do you respond when their junk is laid out in front of you? Scale of 1 to 5. But the great thing, the next one, 3, healing, is that a servant leader sees that brokenness as an opportunity to bring healing and wholeness to a person. That, okay, there's something broken there, and I feel their pain, but there's healing that needs to happen there. And it doesn't mean that you're, a medical doctor trying to cure all their diseases, or that you're a counselor. Some people do need to see somebody professionally for issues and for things that are going on in their lives, but it does mean that you can maybe speak a word of healing or pray a prayer of healing over that person. Are you interested in bringing healing to a situation or to a person, or is it kind of like, oh, I don't know if I want to step into that mess, So rate yourself on that. And just, I already did this with myself, so I've already been through this. As I was going through it even, it was really wonderful to go through. And ultimately, we want to point everybody to the great healer, right? We don't have that in and of ourselves, so we need to point them to the one who does. Persuasion, number 4 is persuasion. The servant leader uses persuasion instead of power to get their goals and tasks that need to happen accomplished. Persuasion instead of power. And this isn't persuasion like you might think of it in a manipulative way. It's, being able to see all the options and facts and lay them out in a way that people can understand and get on board with. It's kind of like casting vision. I mean, each group that goes down has a different kind of vision with it, right? You have different team dynamics and different things going on there. So persuasion, it's building that consensus effectively. And if you flip it over, you've got number 5, awareness. And this is both awareness of yourself as well as your surroundings. How well are you aware of your weaknesses as much as you are of your strengths? Are you aware of triggers that set you off? Are you somebody that gets hangry and you really need to eat something every 2 hours? Are you, or else you're not going to be a very, very nice leader, So are you aware of yourself as well as your surroundings and your team? I mean, that takes some investing, right, to be aware of what's going on. And it takes not just thinking about yourself. You can see where that is essential for a servant leader, is that awareness. You don't want to be completely oblivious to what's going on, but so go ahead and rate your awareness of both yourself and your surroundings. And the next one is conceptualize. So conceptualize is the ability to see the bigger picture, the bigger vision, the bigger mission of both your team and the organization. Jeff does such a great job of just kind of casting that. He can conceptualize even if he doesn't know all the parts and pieces, and you don't need to know all the parts and pieces. You just need to go, this is about something bigger, and being able to see that. Being able to see in your team when something happens, there's something else going on there. There's something else there that I don't quite see, but I recognize there's something else going on. So, and each team is going to be different, which is where number 7 comes in, foresight, right? A servant leader has foresight and can predict an outcome of a situation or a series of events, and so it's what we might call discernment, you know, and sometimes it's very practical, like if at the end of water truck day there's always some kind of blow up in your team. It's like, oh, we're getting to the end of water truck day. Oh, okay, this is what I'm gonna, you know, I can see what's gonna happen here if I don't intervene and something changes course. So, you know, can you see the possibility of how things could go right or wrong in a given situation and be able to, that's what, as a servant leader, is gonna give you the ability to guide that situation. So you're going more in the right direction than the wrong direction, having that foresight. And number 8, we just have a couple more, stewardship. Stewardship, and we're familiar with this term. If you've been in any kind of a Christian environment or teaching, we hear it a lot. But I like to say the word responsibility rather than stewardship, because that's really what it is. You're responsible for the team that God gives you, the time that you have there, that stewardship, understanding that responsibility that you bear towards your team, towards yourself, towards your family, towards the organization of Healing Haiti. And people who aren't servant leaders feel like it's theirs, right? That they own it, that it's their team. So where are you at on stewardship? Do you feel responsible that you have to answer to that? Not if anybody at Healing Haiti knows what you did on a trip, but that God does. Or how you spoke to a team member. Or what you thought of them. Ooh, ouch, ouch, I'm meddling now, right? I'm meddling now. Because I've never had any of those thoughts, right? Number 9, commitment to the growth of people. A servant leader is committed. That means the growth of the people, including themselves, is important. And that you see a need, you'll fill a need, you see that there's an opportunity for growth in that person. Sometimes the most difficult people we deal with are the greatest opportunities for growth. And sometimes God has placed us there to help them grow, when we'd rather run the other way, right? So commitment means the good and the bad and the growth of people. And then number 10, building community. And we'll talk more about this in shepherding your team and what that looks like. But a servant leader builds community for their teams, provides opportunity for interactions on a deeper level than just, hi, I'm Bob. And what's interesting now, if you take the packing party out of that, that gives you another opportunity to build community in a different way. Because that was the first thing I thought. I was like, oh, well, what about the packing party? Oh, I'm going to have to be creative and come up with something else that we can do for that time. So some of it's going to take place before you go, and hopefully a lot takes place before you go with your teams, but a lot of it's going to take place there too. So go ahead and look over your assessment. I'm not those numbers of those areas where you're like, you know what, I could use some work in this area. I think I need to, Google this. Get an audio book and listen to it while I'm commuting so I can grow in this particular area. Did anybody have a hard time doing that? Was that uncomfortable? No, you're not going to say if you're uncomfortable. Oh, wait. All right. So it's on you. I mean, I want you to be honest with yourself, but, ask a few friends too so you can get a kind of a 360 feedback. Ask your kids, how am I at listening? They'll tell you, right? Ask your significant other just so you get a good look at yourself so you know where you need to grow. So that's your servant leadership in a nutshell. There's so much that we could cover on servant leadership that we really don't have time for, but I wanted to go over that so you get an idea of all those different components and what that means for you as you go on. Who's going on a trip really soon, like next week? Anyone? So you're going? All right, we'll be praying for you, brother. Okay, good. Because you might need this next one. Biblical conflict management. So who here loves conflict? Right? Not unless you're WWE, right? Did you hear they're adding the Colonel to the new game? Did you see that? Kentucky Fried Chicken Colonel? Okay, see? Useless facts that I pick up along the way. No, nobody likes conflict, right? But conflict is a part of life. And if you are a conflict avoider, I'm here to tell you that avoiding conflict does not make it go away. I am one of those people that's like, conflict, battle. Yes, let's arm ourselves. Let's get up there. Let's deal with this. Let's tackle it so we can move on to bigger and better things. And my husband is like, no conflict here, no conflict here. We've been married for 26 years, so somehow we've managed to work that out, that difference between the two of us. But avoiding conflict does not make it go away. So I want you to think about a conflict on a trip that you had or that you led, or maybe in a relationship that you have. And without being specific, using any names, just share briefly what that conflict was. You don't even have to share how you dealt with it. I don't want to know. Just we'll go through that later here. But share a little bit about a conflict that you had on a team. Anyone?
Team members feeling left out.
Team members feeling left out. Good.
Things not going the way you did the first time I went.
Ooh. Expectations, right? What else? Anybody else?
People going outside of the boundaries that were set prior to leaving.
Yeah. So people not following the rules that are there for their safety.
Team member coming down, two team members coming down with lice and caused chaos. And
Wow.
people were scared and trying to calm the team down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, outside forces that cause conflict, right?
And this is kind of funny, but a couple weeks before I went on that trip, my daughter came down with lice. So I had to deal with it. I knew exactly
What to do. Yeah.
Isn't that kind of funny how that
Yeah,
happened?
that is.
And certain team members just don't get along with each other.
When certain team members, yeah.
Having a severe peanut allergy and people being upset we can have peanuts.
Wow, there's a conflict, right? Right? What other one?
Your goer is asked why the other team doesn't adhere to the dress code.
Oh,
Every time.
busted.
And a second time goer who was very passionate and just said some things that didn't need to be said to new goers that kind of scared them.
Okay. Before you went?
No.
Oh,
while
okay.
they were there.
While you were there. Yeah.
I also had a goer that was upset because they noticed the other team breaking the guidelines that I had talked to our team about.
Yeah.
So I had to deal with that.
Yeah. Nothing makes people angrier than inconsistent application of the rules, right? It's just the way it is. So those are all conflicts that you've had, and we know ignoring conflict doesn't make it go away. So we're going to look at a couple of different areas or ways that we can deal with, in a biblical way, conflict that will strengthen our team instead of dissolving it. And I know some of you have probably been through this before, and maybe you've been through some biblical conflict management. Anybody been through something like that? Yep, so you've been through something before. So this is just what I've found that works really well, and I use this even in my business with business teams. I don't call it biblical conflict management, but I use those same premises and those same truths because they work. And so that's why I do it. So first of all, address the certainty. Realize that you probably are going to have conflict. And addressing this with your team before you go helps them aware of the fact that you're going to have conflict. So that nobody's surprised when conflict comes up. And we shouldn't be, because we have an enemy that's at work against what we're doing and against what God's doing in their tripgoers' hearts. And, so we shouldn't be surprised. So you want to address the certainty. And so you want to have ground rules in place for handling conflict biblically. And to let your team know, well, look, there's going to be conflict. It's probably going to happen. It's highly likely. You take a bunch of different people from different backgrounds and you throw them into one space for a short amount of time, and a close space at that, and you put them in a heightened emotional state, and you think you're not going to have conflict? And you want to all try to do the same thing together? You're going to have conflict. And so as much as you want to go, oh no, my team's not going to have conflict. Your team's going to have conflict, even if you don't see it. It's going to be happening. It might be happening inwardly, and that's where awareness comes in being a servant leader and knowing something's up. I think it was you who said a team member that feels left out. That's a big one, especially when you've got like families going and then there's an extra person, and how do you do that? That's hard. So I think one of the most important things is setting the ground rules for handling the conflict ahead of time. And so to sit down with your team and go, look, we're all going to be tested during this time. And so let's agree now to handle any conflict that comes up in a biblical way. And you look at Matthew 18, which I have there, and Matthew 18 talks about going to that person first, and then if they don't hear you, to bring somebody else along. And this works. It works in organizations. I mean, I work with teams all the time, and I'll have people come up to me and go, I have to talk to you about something. It's really important. So-and-so just keeps, and I'm like, well, did you talk to her about it? No? Okay, well, you go talk to her about it, and if you can't get it resolved, then come talk to me, and I'll come with you. And it works. And these are adults that I'm working with. It isn't like they're kids, right? But I use it because if it's in Scripture and God says it works, then it works. And so to be able to say that, this is how we're going to do conflict. If you have a problem with somebody, I want you to try and go work that out with that person first. If that doesn't work, if it doesn't get it resolved, then come get me and we'll go together. And so if you set those kind of ground rules, this isn't something I'm just making up. This is the way God has it laid out in His Scripture. So if you instruct them and say that's how we're going to model this, then you'll know how to handle it, and they'll know how to handle it when a conflict arises. And then you won't have somebody coming up to you constantly as well. I use this in like our kids club and VBS too. It's great with the kids, because it's teaching them conflict management when they're young. The other thing that I do is I establish a no complaint policy. And establishing a no complaint policy early on, everybody's going to have ideas. They're always going to see things they don't like, either in a person or another team or something that Healing Haiti's doing. Why don't they do this? Why are they doing that? They should really do this instead of this. Everybody's going to have ideas, right? So I establish a no complaint policy when I work with teams. And basically what I explain to them is when you go into a room and you complain to everybody there, you're basically throwing up on the floor and walking out of the room. And I know it's kind of a really gross analogy, but it works and it drives it home because it's true. Somebody comes and complains to you and you're like, well, what am I supposed to do with that? Now I'm left with it. Now I feel like complaining, And so what I tell them is if you have a complaint, you have to bring a solution along with it. And so it changes the mindset from complaining to solution driven. So if you see something you don't like, come with the solution. I don't mind if you complain, but you got to come with a solution. If you're just, because there's lots of people who will complain just to hear themselves complain, right? There's negative Nellies, and they just are in that rut of complaining. And so this weeds those out. And if they don't have a solution on their own, then they have to work with another team member and say, hey, I see this as a problem. Do you see this as a problem? I can't come up with a solution. Can you help me come up with a solution? Now you got 2 people working together on a solution instead of 1 person just complaining about a problem. And so it's really solutions driven. So establishing a no complaint policy is huge because it does make a difference. I have seen organizations, their whole culture turn around in a matter of months after we instituted this. Because what it did is that all the people who just wanted to complain for complaining's sake were just silenced. Nobody would listen to them because they'd come to them to complain and they'd go, well, what's your solution? Well, I don't have a solution. Well, then why are you complaining to me? Stop throwing up on me and go back to work, So it works. It really has a powerful, and it switches the mindset, Hey, I don't like this, but what's a solution? Well, if there's not, then am I just complaining? So it's really effective tool. So even though it doesn't say it in the Bible, although it does say, be thankful in everything, give thanks, for this is the will of God. So it doesn't say no complaint policy, but I think we can throw that in there. It says consider the source. There are 2 sources for every conflict, Satan and self. Those are our 2 sources for every single conflict. Satan and self, or Satan and sin, if you want to say it that way. So we only have one enemy, and this is the other thing. We only have one enemy. One enemy, Ephesians 6:12. We wrestle against not flesh and blood, right? So letting your team know ahead of time, hey, we all only have one enemy, and it's nobody on this team. That's cool, right? So none of us are enemies. But we do only have one enemy, and he's a deceiver and a murderer and a liar, and he loves to divide and conquer. He loves to get in between people and cause problems. And if you don't think he's at work in your teams or working against you or your teams, I encourage you to read Ephesians 6. Our co-leader's not our enemy. Healing Haiti's not our enemy. None of the people on our team are our enemy. Right? None of the staff is the enemy. We have one enemy. So keeping that, and he plays dirty. He plays dirty. He doesn't play by any rules, and he doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about your team. Long and short of it. The second source is self, or our sin nature, our lower self. Right? James 4:1-3 talks about what causes quarrels and fighting among you. Don't they come from your evil desires at war within you? I mean, this is really why there's quarrels and fights. God's telling us right here, this is why this stuff happens. So in order to really effectively manage conflict biblically, we have to let our team know these truths before we go. So, addressing, the certainty of it, yeah. You want to anticipate that it's going to happen. You want to set those ground rules, but then you want to let them know what the source is so that they can check themselves too when they're going into a conflict. And then assess the situation. Every situation, if you're in the middle of conflict on one of your trips, every situation is going to be different. You as a leader, we have to assess the situation. That's part of that awareness and part of that foresight. Going, okay, there's going to be physical, emotional, and spiritual factors at play here. Physical, are they hungry, hot, tired, thirsty? Probably all of the above, right? If you're on a trip, there's some people don't deal well with physical discomfort. It sets them on edge. It makes everything worse for them. That's just the way they are. So set them in the shade, give them a bottle of water and a granola bar, and 5 minutes to just chill. But understand that there's other things at play. There's those physical ones. You got to assess that situation and go, okay, is this a hungry, tired thing, or is this something spiritual? Is it, everybody's at a different place in their journey with God. Is this a baby believer? Is this an immature believer that maybe should know better but doesn't? Is this somebody that maybe doesn't know much about God's word? And how can I help bring that healing and wholeness to this situation? Or is it something that's emotional? You know, is there something going on there for them emotionally? Probably. Especially, you know, as you're going out. You never know when emotionally something's going to hit somebody on the trip and how that's going to come out. It might come out in conflict because it just has to come out. And so assessing the situation and really looking over that and going, kind of what's going on here. And as you're doing that, really asking God to help you see what's really going on. Help me assess this situation, Lord. Show me what they need. Show me what needs to happen here. And then the fourth and last one in biblical conflict management is leading the solution. Not every conflict ends in full resolution, but there can be a temporary solution at least. Although God is always driving us to be ministers of reconciliation, right? Reconciliation, that's his goal, always. And so I'll go through just in leading the situation, pray. And if you can, pray out loud. Ask the people involved in the conflict if it's gotten to the point where they have to bring you in. Do you mind if I just pray before we talk about this? And you know, who's going to say no? If they say no, you know, you've just assessed the situation, you know. So just a quick prayer. So that gives you the pause and the power you need to deal with the situation and lead it towards solution. And you need that pause and that power, right? And then it's listening, which goes back to servant leadership. Listening to understand, not to respond. Listening to each side of their story, asking them to focus not on the person, but on the problem at hand. So that it's not attacking one another, right? You want them to focus on the problem, not the other person. What's the issue? And then repeating what they're saying so the other person gains understanding, because that other person's not listening to understand, right? They're angry or upset or whatever, so you have to be the one getting that full understanding. So listening, asking, so ask each one, you know, as you're driving for that solution, asking for the solution and then asking if that solution's acceptable. Are we in agreement? Are we in agreement with that solution? You know, so that you're getting that verbal agreement that there is a solution and that you're leading and driving towards that solution. And if a consensus cannot be reached, guess who gets to decide what the solution is? That's why they're calling you a leader. Because sometimes you just have to make that decision. And what you want, if you can't get full consensus, is they disagree but they will support it. Right? So either they agree but need more information, they disagree but will support, or they disagree and won't support. And you want to at least get disagree but will support when you can't get consensus. And then the last part of that in leading the solution is just encouraging them to put the past behind them. You know, that forgiveness. I think Sue read that scripture earlier in the evening from Colossians about forgiving one another and how important that is. So conflict is almost always guaranteed, but it's not impossible to resolve. So I want you to take this, and if you need to, you know, reduce it down onto a little 4x6 card that you can keep in your back pocket or take with you on the trip. Or use this, go ahead and use this when you meet with your teams and say, here's what we're going to do for conflict resolution when there's conflicts on the team. And share it with them. I don't care. Go ahead and use it. It's fine with me. I'm sure it's fine with you guys too. So we have a few minutes left for shepherding your team. So we'll go through this because we want to leave time for you guys for question and answering. And
I maybe missed it under assess the situation. There were a couple blanks. I don't know that
oh,
was covered.
Which ones? Thank you.
You had to ask God to help see give blank, stay in, or blank and blank from the
Yep. Wouldn't you know, look at that. What did I do with that part of it? Assess the situation. Good. Ask God for discernment.
Discernment. Okay.
Yep. Give grace. That's it. Give grace. And then I have stay calm and removed from the conflict. Thank you for pointing that out. Calm and removed from the conflict. Yes. All right, so shepherding your team, and all of this you'll see kind of comes together. Do you like that little cartoon? Yeah. because that's what it's going to feel like sometimes. So being a shepherd is something that's foreign to almost all of us, except for maybe you and your wife, right? A little bit. All right. We don't understand what it takes to keep a herd alive and thriving. You know, it's just not part of our society or where we live. You know, but in biblical times it meant living, eating, breathing, sleeping, taking care of, nursing back to health this flock. And if you read through we won't go through it, but the 23rd Psalm, and there's this great book called A Shepherd's Look at the 23rd Psalm. Have any of you guys ever heard of that? It's like from back in the 80s or something. But it's such a great book because it really talks about it from a shepherd's point of view and what that means, what our great shepherd is. So one of the things to remember is that no one herds just one sheep, right? You herd a flock of sheep. You don't have just one sheep, do you? Okay, all right. I'd feel sorry for you if you did. I'd give you another one or something. I have just one goat, okay? I have one goat. I know, I don't have a herd of goats. I just have one. I know, but we have a horse. So, yeah.
And horses are herd animals.
So they hang out. They hang out together. They like each other. I'm okay. You can come and take care of them if you want. So that'd be great. So shepherding is about building this community, right? And building community is part of what we talked about in servant leadership. And when we're building community, we want to build slowly. You want to provide multiple connection points for people. You're not going to throw them all on the airplane that morning and expect them to be tight, right? And if they're related, it's going to be even worse. You need to build community slowly. So having multiple touch points for them. And then the next one is to love deeply. And this can be difficult sometimes because sometimes people rub us the wrong way. God put sandpaper people in our lives for a reason. Because we got some sharp edges he wants to smooth out. And he needs some sandpaper people to take care of that. And so understanding that God has a purpose for every person that's on the trip for you, for each other, and knowing that you know that some people are going to rub you the wrong way, but ask God for the kind of love that he has for them. I remember the first trip I went on, there was a gal that I just didn't like. I just didn't like her. But I had to keep going, God, I want to love her. I want to love her like you do. I just want to love her like you do. And he did, you know. I mean, there's times when you have to do that. Let's be honest. We don't like everybody that we run into, right? But God calls us to love everyone. And listen patiently. That's how you build community. And we've covered a lot of that, so I won't go into that. And then pray diligently. I think prayer is our most underutilized power tool. And it is powerful. So praying for those people on our team by name, huge impact. You send heaven's armies on ahead of you before the trip even starts. That's a cool thought, right? That's a cool thought. Okay, so shepherds lead. They lead, and this takes precedence over the life of the shepherd. So they come first, and being that servant leader is key to this. You know, it's interesting because shepherds were kind of an outcast in society in biblical times because they smelled like sheep. And if you know how sheep smell, right? So you don't smell like sheep, but I live in Wisconsin, lots of dairy farmers, and you know when they've been in the barn. You go into the gas station and it's a dairy barn. It's a dairy barn, and you smell it, and you can't get rid of that smell. So that's what it was like for shepherds as they led them. So I want to encourage you to definitely read over Psalm 23, and we won't have time to look at that. But the sheep come first, you come second. Sheep come first, you come second. Shepherds lead, shepherds feed. Last words of Jesus to Peter were, feed my lambs, tend my sheep, feed my lambs. So it's interesting that Jesus asked a fisherman to become a shepherd. It was outside his comfort zone. And leading and feeding and guiding and protecting these sheep that God is putting into your care for a week is going to be outside our comfort zone sometimes. We're going to feel ill-equipped, and we're not going to have all the answers, but we have the great shepherd who guides us and leads us. So I think that's interesting that he asked that. But you must feed yourself before you can feed anybody else. And encouraging your team in God's Word is very important no matter where they are. They know this is a faith-based organization, right? They're not going to be surprised if you bring up the Bible and you share some verses from God's Word and you pray. And nobody's going to throw you in prison if you do that. Can I just tell you that? We're all okay here. So we can share that, and feeding them is key. It's key, and feeding yourself. There's too many resources out there for us to not be feeding ourselves. You can read on your app. I get tons of emails every morning that are bringing God's Word right into my inbox. You know, there are ways for us to feed ourselves. So we're never too busy to eat, right? We're never too busy to eat. So shepherds protect, and I want to finish this up so I can give you time for questions and answers. And they lay down their lives for their sheep. And you know, my daughter went on this last trip that I went on, and I thought, you know, those thoughts enter your mind, like what if something happened to her, you know? I mean, they do, they enter your mind. I didn't entertain it for very long, but I thought, man, I would put somebody down really quickly if they came after my daughter, but would I do that for everybody else on the team? It just made me think, you know, would I be there to protect them? Not just physically, we have people that can do that and help us with that, but protecting them from those spiritual attacks that are coming at them, protecting them from error by teaching them God's truth and feeding God's truth into them, even if they don't want it. Protecting them from discouragement by encouraging them, protecting them from hurting themselves or others. That's part of protecting. A shepherd protects. So dealing with that conflict in a biblical way when it comes up. You're doing your sheep well. And the last one, shepherds guide. They guide, not drive. You drive cattle, you guide sheep. Okay? So there's a big difference, and I'll let you read some of that on the rest of it on your own, because there's nothing else to fill in there. But in closing, just let me say none of us are perfect leaders, and none of us have arrived, and we all have work, and it was truly convicting even as I went through this and prepared everything and was studying through this. God showed me all kinds of ways. He's like, come on, TJ, you need to work on that. Let's work on that together. And that's the awesome thing, is that God doesn't just throw us out there. I don't want you to leave being like, man, I really stink as a leader. I want you to go, okay, God, let's do this. I want to be just the best leader I can be for you. So let's work on this together. And He will. He will guide and lead and protect and feed us along the way, because He's the good shepherd. All right, so you want to go ahead and do question and answer?